No, you didn't catch it. It didn't happen to you. You went out to the store and you purchased it by purchasing sugar. You've literally got to get rid of the fungus that drives that desire for sugar.
Okay.
So they're suggesting that insulin, that Alzheimer's and dementia, and those are actually a type 3 diabetes. So I'm going to have that chocolate cake and some, but I'll just pound down more insulin.
Right.
This is Salus Health Topics with Dr. Troy Giles. Welcome to today's episode on diabetes.
So we want to talk a little bit today about diabetes. Now, I just want to read a quote here, which was, in 1994, the American Diabetes Association recommended that Americans consume 60 to 70% of their calories from carbohydrates, and the diabetes epidemic took off. Yeah. So you cover a little bit of that in your book, The Top 25 Conditions and More for Natural Healing. Mm-hmm. And let's talk about diabetes.
So diabetes, there's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is juvenile onset. Our kids get it. One of the research articles I read was that, do you remember we talked about leaky gut syndrome?
Yep.
And the idea of proteins coming through that shouldn't. They correlated cow's milk. The protein found in cow's milk that was leaking through the gut was very similar. If this was cow's milk leaking through the gut, it looked sort of similar to this. This was cow's milk, this was the pancreas. It would attack the cow's milk as abnormal protein coming through the gut, and seeing something that was similar to it would attack it as well.
As autoimmune.
As autoimmune. So the idea of juvenile onset, there's an autoimmune aspect to it. And I always find that autoimmune issues are directly related to leaky gut syndrome. So that's part one. I've also seen diabetics, type 1, where the children get sick with a virus and overnight turn diabetic because the virus has attacked the pancreas.
A virus?
Wow. A virus or any kind of layer of infection attacking the pancreas, shutting down the islets of Langerhans. Those islets of Langerhans are what produce the insulin. So those now are diminished, shot, inflamed, dead, and we now have a pancreas that's not producing enough insulin to handle the sugar. Okay. So that's type 1. Type 2 is adult onset. It's further on in life, and it is purchased.
What do you mean by that?
That means that they don't drive down the road and run through a big cloud of something that gets them, they interacted or contacted diabetes. I caught diabetes. No, you didn't catch it. It didn't happen to you. You went out to the store and you purchased it by purchasing sugar and overloading your body constantly with sugar, overloading the pancreas' ability to produce insulin, and it burns out. It literally burns out and it quits producing as much insulin as needed. You went out and purchased it. So the good news is you can unpurchase it. You can get rid of the layers of infection in your gut that drive the desire for sugar. Fungus, for example, is there, and it sends out chemical that makes you want to go eat sugar to try to feed it. Literally, the fungus is producing that chemical. You now want to go buy sugar, you eat it, constantly eating it, burns it down, and now you have slow degenerative onset of type 2 adult diabetes.
Right. Now, I mean, these are complex subject matters, and we're trying to keep it somewhat simple for the general audience. Insulin's for the purpose of passing the energy into the cells so the cells can make use of it, and it means that there's a bunch of little doors, so to speak, metaphorically, on the outside of the cell. And if there's too much insulin in the system because of sugar, the cells will begin to close those doors for accessibility, and then you have a problem.
Insulin resistance. So that's exactly what you're saying. It's like the cell walls shut. They don't allow that anymore, and so now you've got too much insulin. You don't even actually have the ability to bring in your sugars, to store them as fat. So now you're stuck with all the sugar in your system.
Well, it's funny, the stat that we started off with was 1994. The Diabetic Association telling people to eat 60-70% carbs, and since then we have this exponential rise in diabetes within North America. And you were saying off camera, That's not the way it is in China or other countries that don't have access to all the sugars in the diet. And in correlation to that, number one selling commodity increase from the mid-90s is insulin.
Yeah.
No surprise there.
And what's interesting is with a lot of my diabetic patients, they use insulin. They'll say, well, I don't know how much insulin I need until I can see what I'm going to eat. So I'm going to have that chocolate cake and but I'll just pound down more insulin.
Right.
No big deal.
And that creates that kind of, the insulin demand exceeds the sugar, so the body demands more sugar, and then that surpasses the insulin, and then you have this constant changing back and forth. So one of the other things that kind of comes out of this in the research is that the diabetics, type 1 or type 2, tend to be more prone to all sorts of mental disorders, and one of them being down the road Alzheimer's or dementia.
So insulin is pro-inflammatory. So whenever you have insulin release, you're going to have some inflammation. If you have a nice ice cream or a chocolate cake or whatever, you go to a party last night or this morning, you're going to be a little bit more inflamed. You're going to have just a bit more brain fog, a little bit more, your eyes might be swollen, your joints might be a little bit more sticky, if you will, or stiff. That's because of the inflammation from the insulin.
Yeah, well, we had some ice cream last night, and we're both feeling a little foggier today. So.
So the other issue with the diabetes and Alzheimer's and so forth is when you have too much insulin, it's going to shut down. It'll burn because of the inflammation. It's going to burn shut through the inflammation, the arteries and veins, the small arteries and veins in your feet, in your eyes, in your brain.
Okay,
so they're suggesting that insulin, that Alzheimer's and dementia and those are actually a type 3 diabetes.
Oh, really?
That's the new buzzword.
Interesting. So, it's a big subject matter again, but, how do we start to go about depurchasing the diabetics too? Because what we're kind of fleshing out is that if you created it, there is a way to get back to proper functionality.
And it's difficult. This is one of the most difficult things because there's so much emotion around food. It's, you go to a party, we're going to have some food, we're going to have this chocolate cake. If I feel badly, I'm going to go home and have some chocolate cake. So we all of us, many of us overeat or binge eat when we feel bad. It's been a stressful day. I deserve myself a big chocolate shake.
Sure.
So you've got to get control of the sugar. So I do that by making sure that I've got things to eat that are good when I feel the sugar crave. So I'm going to go to my refrigerator where I've already got my vegetables cut, ready to go, with a little bit of ranch party mix or whatever, dipping in some ranch. It tastes good. It'll satisfy that craving. Or some almonds, nuts, mixed nuts, even some low glycemic fruits. So apples are okay. Things that aren't, like a banana is very high glycemic versus a strawberry is less. So you can work yourself down out of that simple carbohydrate, the simple sugar, if you'll just have something ready to eat when you have that desire. That's the first thing. Secondly, you need to get rid of that infection. You've literally got to get rid of the fungus that drives that desire for sugar. That's where Salus structured silver comes in. Taking that on a tablespoon in the morning, tablespoon in the evening, or more as needed, can wipe clear that fungus out of there that drives your need and desire chemically and your dependence on sugar.
So what we're talking about then is that the cravings can be stimulated by these organisms that aren't your biological tissue. They are part of the
offending organisms.
Offending organisms, right? So removing those by, we said, structured silver or something there.
And then the other thing I find many times with diabetes is that the tail of the pancreas, in the tail, the pancreas looks like a comet. Almost. It's thicker at one end, goes to the tail. Find microparasites in the tail.
Okay.
So we can use, again, the silver, because it will get rid of anything that's water soluble. Parasites are water soluble. And that's so they can get in and remove that electron out of the cell wall of anything that's water soluble.
Right.
Knocking it out.
So then the broad strategy then is to kind of wean yourself off of the insulin by taking out the negative conditions that are causing the sugar demand. So a diet modification, maybe some silver input, and now you can start to monitor your blood sugar levels, because I've heard it on a few different occasions. People will say, "Oh, my blood sugar levels are out of whack," and it's kind of a funny thing to say, because then they simultaneously will say, "I'm eating cleanly," though. It's like, well, you're eating sugar. If it's in your body, you're eating the sugar somewhere. So you've got to remove that condition of failure, and then you can start looking at what else can be done.
Yep. I like that. Removing the condition of failure and then repairing where you want to go. You can repair pancreatic tissue with supplementation that's natural, that's specifically designed to repair that organ. You can repair organs. They don't have to be cut out. If they're gangrenous and they're all, the surgeons need to go in after it. But you can repair it using natural things, acupuncture, herbs, chiropractic. There are things to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
To repair.
Now we're talking about, do we want to immediately go into the most invasive form of treatment, or can we find some other ways and use invasive treatments, like pharmaceuticals or surgery, which have their value, obviously, as the last resort when you do all things out. So causality, again, at the forefront of this. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
That's good. I think we're set.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, Internet! So as it turns out, food is a pretty emotional subject matter for a lot of people. A lot of us just don't want to modify our diets because we're comfortable with what we're eating, even though it might be leading us on a path that isn't going to get us the health results we want. Well, that's something we're going to have to overcome. And diabetes kind of shows up in people's lives because of decisions over the long run that aren't necessarily in their best health interest. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching again. We're going to continue the Salus Health Topics series because you guys keep asking us questions, and we've got to give you some solutions to some of the problems. In the meantime, check out some of our other videos we've created and leave a comment with some questions, or share it, or do those things that everyone else tells you to do when you're watching these kind of end cards on the videos on YouTube. So yeah, that's all. Have a good week.